I like to say that compliance is the security referee. We have a playbook. We know the rules of the game, controls. Compliance frameworks kind of give us those playbooks.
Hello, it's Jacob Hill with GRC Academy. Today I'm here with Mr. Tim Golden. Tim, how are you today?
Hey, Jacob, I'm doing really well. Despite this New England spring allergy stuff that I think is affecting everybody in the world right now. But yeah, Jacob, thank you so much for having me on. Really excited to chat today.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. And folks, if you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to like, comment, share, subscribe, review, all the things. Helps me out. Thanks in advance. Tim, tell us about yourself. How did you get to where you are today?
Sort of the origin story. We were a federal government think tank, for lack of a better term, research organization, working with, Department of Ed, Health and Human Services, HHS, all the different things. And we were building, trying to modernize what we were doing. So we, started building web-based applications. As that progressed down the road, obviously most government contracts, they come up for recompete and renewal and all that fun stuff every 5 to 6 years. Well, we rebid, we won, and there was one little sentence in that contract that said, you will adhere to NIST 853. Way back in late 2006, 2007, nobody knew what that meant. At the time, it was version 3 of 853, moving towards version 4, and we had to follow it. Commonly now, most people might think of, this framework as FedRAMP, and we were eventually, leaning into FISMA or FedRAMP Moderate. So we were building web apps for the feds, having to eventually adhere to FedRAMP Moderate equivalency. That's kind of where I started way back in 2007 with the word GRC, or the concept of it didn't really exist in the MSP space. It wasn't really something that we all knew about. Enterprise kind of knew about it. And let me tell you, some of those antiquated government systems of managing frameworks and controls and all the things were super difficult. So me, being the programmer that I was, built my own GRC, quote unquote, didn't know what it was called until several years later. Basically one framework, NIST 853, and one customer, us, and managing all the things I needed to manage around implementation statements, evidence, policies, all the things. And so that's kind of where we started way back in the day of, hey, the tools that were out there didn't exist. You couldn't even Google policy XYZ because they didn't exist. So, started our compliance journey way back in 06, 07 timeframe, and really needed a way to understand what this all meant. Unfortunately, explained to the department what it all meant, and kind of work side by side and hand in glove with the CISO over there and the team at the different departments, working through this. Going from version 3 to version 4, from version 4 to version 5, and all the things. Eventually, getting what the feds, or what we now know as authorization to operate.
Back in the day when I started in the security realm, DoD was calling it information assurance. But now we have a term called a GRC. What would you say the definition of GRC is?
Part of GRC, when you look at the first word, governance, we'll skip over that for a second. The word risk, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? You have a cranky old chair and you sit on it, you're at risk of falling over, blah, blah. Risk, pretty easy to understand. Compliance, fairly easy to understand. You have rules and roadmaps and controls and things you need to follow and best practice. It's the govern word that is now becoming more prevalent in our space. Back up 2007. We were governing because we had to. Let me explain what governance means in the most simplest terms. It means to steer. So if you back up all the way to the 19th century, the word govern really meant to steer the ship through the channels around the risky waters. So I wanted to govern the ship or steer the ship around the risk, around, through the channels. So when I think of it in terms of GRC, I want to govern or steer our customer, our business away from risks while following some kind of compliance roadmap, GRC. Steer away from the risks, following some path, compliance.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to explain it. I also think there's an interesting conversation around compliance, and we've all heard the people say that compliance does not equal security, all of those things. In my opinion, especially for small business, I think that compliance can be a way to get to security because you have to, because there's some regulation telling you you've got to implement this framework, and that's an opportunity in my mind to go from little to no security to a reasonably secure environment because of that driving regulation. And often people don't do anything until they're forced to. So, I mean, I don't like to view it that way, as compliance does not equal security. I mean, sure, especially if you're using a checkbox mentality, but my overall opinion is without frameworks, it would be terrible, because we'd have to say, all right, implement security. How do I do that? Like, what does that mean? These compliance frameworks are here to give us instructions and repeatable steps that we can use every single time. I don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. So I'm thankful for the compliance frameworks out there. What's your opinion?
I like to say that compliance is the security referee. We have a playbook. We know the rules of the game controls. We have, a person throwing flags, i.e. not met or partially met. So compliance to us is the security referee, right? If you're playing the game and you're understanding these are the rules and the guardrails and the best practices of, quote, quote, winning the security game and ultimately protect, defend, and secure the businesses, compliance frameworks kind of give us those playbooks. Whether you're, in a defense space and you're following NIST 800-171, commonly now known as CNSC, whether you're in the financial space and dealing with credit cards and PCI. So depending on the industry, you have a different playbook, just like you would have a playbook for football versus baseball versus basketball. These are all just referees of the game or the security game in which you are playing in.
Great points. Well, talking about the GRC, I've seen some government RFPs calling out that term much more. Yeah. If someone's looking or just getting started, what kind of careers are there? Because it's expansive, right? It's an umbrella over a lot of things.
Absolutely. So, our good friends at NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, built this nice framework. It's really a way for people wanting to become, from truck driver to CISO, right? I like to use that a little analogy, right? And by using the NICE framework, you have an opportunity to kind of pick your path, right? When we say cybersecurity, no one can really define that because it's so broad. But as you start to niche down, which we talk a lot about, maybe it's a data analyst role. Maybe it's understanding this is how the business operates. This is the data around that. And I want to become a data analyst so that I can better report up the chain where our risks are, whether financial or whatever. Maybe it's a data analyst role. For those that are, high school, college, thinking about a career move, from truck driver to CISO, you want to start with some basic technology understanding, whether it's a specific cert like CompTIA or any of those IC squared, being able to just set the foundation of, I know how to turn a computer on and I know how to right click, right? And starting to dig a little bit deeper into first the technical components. And whether you choose the technical first or you choose the administrative first, that's the side that most techies forget. They spend a lot of time on the ones and zeros, bytes and bits, and clicky buttons, but they forget the administrative, the govern component, those administrative, like policy writing, understanding how to write in plain language, right? Not using big, fluffy legalese kinds of words, but actually understanding how to write. Maybe you take a writing course and understanding how to like write at third grade reading level or whatever. So it's not always take some really in-depth technical SOC 2 analysis course. It's the administrative side as well. That is the biggest gap that I see in our space is everybody wants to click buttons, but nobody wants to understand the writing component, the administrative component, the change management component. It is so extremely important.
Speaking of compliance frameworks, there's so many of them. ISO 27001, RMF, there's CMMC, SOC, all these different frameworks. What should someone start with? Because honestly, I can imagine it feels overwhelming to someone who's new and looking at this.
First and foremost, stop thinking technical and start thinking administrative. When I start thinking administrative, I need to start to think about the business. Maybe I should start with a business impact analysis. Maybe I should look at some of my contracts that I've signed that probably have legal obligations to them and look at my industry. DoD is the easiest to pick on because most people are familiar with it. Yay, I'm Johnny's lug nut. I always use Johnny's lug nut. I make lug nuts that go on the wheels, that go on the tank, that goes on the, military vehicle. That's amazing. It's a very important piece. But you probably have a contract with the government that probably has a clause in it, a FAR or a DFARS clause in it that says you will follow NIST 800-171, i.e. CMMC. Department of Defense is pretty easy to pick on when it comes to what framework, because you have a clause in there that tells you.
Yes.
Same could be true with, anywhere in the supply chain or anywhere in most businesses. And if you don't know, maybe look at something like the FTC safeguards, right? It's obtainable. It's good business practices. Maybe even look at something like your insurance policy. Regardless of what industry you're in, there should be some kind of playbook, some kind of referee, some kind of compliance that you can follow. So even if you're just the clothing store down the street, you probably want to consider something like FTC safeguards. Those rulings changed in December a while back. It applies to a lot more businesses than you would probably imagine. It's obtainable. It's good safeguards, policies, procedures, the things, right? So first and foremost, understand your business and legal obligations from a security perspective, and the flip side, which nobody talks about, the privacy component.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about the privacy component as well in the IT MSP space. We always talk about the clicky security buttons. We don't ever talk about the, hey, protect my privacy and my data, right? GDPR, California. There's almost every single state either has a law on the books or is in the works to have a law on the books around privacy. And we don't talk enough about it.
I think another thing aligned with privacy is data retention. Because often I think that things just live there forever. And that is something actually that's addressed in NIST 800-171 revision 3. The latest revision is data retention. The regulations are geared towards minimum data retention periods, not necessarily maximum where you get rid of things. Right. So NIST 800-171 revision 3, I think, is going to be driving obviously that maximum when you need to get rid of it. But we're limited by the minimum periods, which is kind of strange. It's like a records management thing. They didn't think about security. So we'll see how that evolves going forward.
Records retention can be a good thing, but it can also be a very bad thing. Say, for example, you're doing, I don't know, a government contract. The contract is 5 years and you have a retention period of at least 3 years. What happens on year 4, where you haven't defined a destruction component, and somebody on that contract then comes back and says, wait a minute. There's a conflict of interest here that has been part of that project for 5 years. We discovered something. Now turn over everything that you have and let us audit all that. Well, since there was no data destruction policy and user X kept everything forever, we had to do the discovery. We had to literally go back to every single communication, every single document, every single thing, discover it all, because we didn't have a destruction policy, and then print it, get it, and do all the things. So if we had had a destruction policy that says after 3 years, we destroy everything, on year 4, when they thought there was a conflict of interest, there would have been nothing to turn over. Right? So think about data destruction and the longevity of that. Sure, there are legal and contractual requirements, obviously point to that first. But the quicker you can get rid of data, the better. At least in my kind of, one-off thought process, because I've had to go through it.
Right.
On year 3, we still had the data. On year 4, when they asked for it, we still had the data. If I had a destruction policy that said, get rid of it after the minimum standard, nothing would have come of it.
And when we're dealing with regulated data, that comes with other responsibilities, incident reporting, oftentimes, things like that. And so if we can get rid of that data, that will remove reporting responsibilities, because often the way DoD handles it is it goes to the individual program office. And just think, if you've dealt with 20, 30, 40 different program offices and that are still around, because DoD, systems, they hang around for a long time. That's a whole lot of work you're creating for yourself. Hey folks, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Vanta. Is your manual GRC program slowing you down? Well, there's something more efficient than spreadsheets, screenshots, and manual processes: Vanta. With Vanta, GRC can be so much easier while also strengthening your security posture and driving revenue for your business. Vanta automates key areas of your GRC program, including compliance, risk, and customer trust, and it streamlines the way you manage all of this information. And the impact is real. A recent IDC analysis found that compliance teams using Vanta are 129% more productive. So get back time to focus on strengthening security and scaling your business. Get started at vanta.com/GRC Academy. That's VANTA.com/GRC Academy. Now back to the episode. And speaking of people, we have technical folks and non-technical folks. We have program managers, developers, and all of them contribute to the GRC process, even though maybe they don't get it, they don't understand it. But why do technical people need to understand GRC?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it starts with why. If I don't have an idea of the bigger picture of why I'm doing this, I might not necessarily be bought into how come we're doing this. The really great analogy that I like to use, which happened to me. Yay, we got 853 written in a contract. Yay, I need to remove administrative rights. Yay, I'm the IT guy. What do? I go to every machine in the entire company across multiple states, and I remove admin rights. Great. Until the staff member runs down the hallway and starts yelling and actually swearing at me because they can't do their job.
Yes.
I need to install this access database and this macro to do this thing inside. Whoa, no, you don't have admin rights. Yeah, it was ugly for the first couple of months. I had to pause. I had to sit down with the executive leadership, I had to have the hard conversation of, we can't have admin rights, period. And and then we had to start developing the message around why, and sit with the entire staff and explain to them, listen, administrative rights bad. Why, all the things. Here's alternatives. And by the way, if we don't do this, your job and the 15 other people employed by that contract goes away. Mm-hmm. I'm fine turning it back on, but you'll probably be out of a job.
Yeah.
And by the way, the mission of what the program was doing would probably go away. Mm-hmm. So we had, as technical folk, sitting with the powers that be, up and down the chain, and having that, why are we doing this conversation? And then communicating that effectively all the way down to Johnny Janitor that sweeps the floor. Because once they're bought in on the why, everything else becomes easier. Trust me, for the better part of a year, I was known as Mr. No. It was hard. I mean, IT in and of itself is thankless anyways. But when you get people running down the hall actually swearing at you, it does a little to your psyche. And until I sat with the executive team and said, listen, I can't, I'm done here. We had to build that why conversation. MSPs and GRC teams, and why do they collide? So I think there's, we hear a lot of pushback from MSPs when it comes to compliance or dealing with governance, or even just something simple as policy management, is because, I hate to say it, they're afraid. They're afraid of what they don't know. They're afraid of getting it wrong. They're afraid of being culpable, right? I hate to lean into the fear component, but it's real. And working alongside MSPs, like we do a compliance scorecard with our Kickstart or our professional services to help augment staff, helping them build their confidence. They don't know what they don't know, right? The known knowns, the known unknowns, the unknown know, they don't know what they don't know. Right. Now, if I were to say to my level 2 technician, hey, go rip and replace that hard drive, no problem. They'd grab a screwdriver and they'd be off and running. 10 minutes later, they'd be done. Why? Because they've probably done it a few times before. There's probably been some good YouTube videos. They probably learned their lesson. They've probably done it, right? So they feel confident in doing the work. Now, if I said to that same level 2 technician, go write me a password policy, they would have some fear and trepidation. They would be like, oh, I got to Google this. I got to chat GPT this. Is it right? Do I have the right number of characters? What's the requirement? I just go down the rabbit hole. It's because it's not something that they're used to. And when we're not used to a thing, we don't have the confidence in our own ability. But here's the myth. You actually can do the work. And by the way, you're probably, as an MSP, in the best position to facilitate that work. And not only that, charge for that work. I hammer on this a lot. MSPs, you shouldn't be doing free risk assessments, period, end of story. And you shouldn't be doing free consulting on the results of those assessments, period, end of story, right? So if I could leave an MSP with advice around GRC, number one, you don't have to be afraid, because there's lots of people in our space, like us, like Jacob, like Summit 7, the list goes on and on. There's lots of great people in our space willing and able to help you build your own confidence. Yeah, we'll probably charge you for it because we should, but that's okay. Investing in your own learning, in your own confidence building, in your own, that is money well spent. So don't be afraid. You can certainly build confidence around something you haven't done before. You do it every single day, just on the technical side. And there are great people in our MSP community, like Compliance Scorecard, Jacob, Summit 7, the list goes on and on and on, GRC Academy, all the things available at your disposal. Some free of charge, some not so much. Don't be afraid. Tackle it on. You got this.
Tell us about some of the interesting stories you've experienced in your career and maybe even, what you've learned from those and all that.
Let me tell you about the time I ransomwared myself. Okay, that sounds really harsh, but that was the point. So back in the day, we needed to discover PII, student data, particular records, all the things. We needed to do like discovery across our enterprise to figure out what do we have, where is it, data flowing, blah, 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 blah. And so there was a really good tool, I won't mention it back then, that was kind of one of the forefronts of, data discovery. Scan the network and tell me if you found stuff, credit cards, whatever. The cool thing I liked about it is I could ask them to make a custom regex to scan. Because, student IDs back in the day, like they varied. Credit card, no problem. Social Security, no problem. It did those things. So great. I installed the tool. I put it on all the network servers and it started telling me where it found stuff. I requested, hey, I need like this regex and that regex. So they made some custom ones for me. Good job, blah, blah. We kept finding data, which is awesome. First part of any scoping conversation is where do you have the data? And so we did that, installed the tool. Great. But then I had to literally request every couple of days, can you make this regex? Can you make that regex? Can you do this? And I just got frustrated in the end. And I'm like, listen, I have too much need on creating custom regexes and custom searching. I'm just going to stop for now. You tell me when I have the ability. Oh, it's on the roadmap for, Q17. Fine. So as anything, I used the tool for a couple of months. It did part of what I wanted, but it didn't have everything that I needed. And I said, hey, you know what? Tell me when you have it. I'll come back. In the meantime, I have a good baseline to start with. It was a month-to-month contract, so I wasn't worried about commits and all that fun stuff. I canceled, I uninstalled, and I moved on my day. Of course, the day or so after I uninstalled, because Friday over the weekend, because I didn't want interruptions. Monday morning, I get an email like, "Hey, I can't open this file." Oh, no problem. Maybe it got corrupt because it's 4,000 folders deep, and once we hit that 200 character limit. Anyways, long story short, a file got corrupt, so I just restored it. And then another office, a file got corrupt, and then another office, a file got corrupt. And I'm like, well, hold on here. All right, they're different locations. I mean, they're all and then I started digging and I'm like, well, it's not your typical ransomware because it's not the entire folder or the entire server. It's just random files in random folders. I didn't know what was going on. Back then, we had our good friend, Wes, who ran Perch, pre-ConnectWise, and our good friend Kyle at Huntress. And I pinged them on LinkedIn and I'm like, dude, I'm having this weird thing. So eventually we get on a Zoom, we start digging in, we're giving the files, we're looking at there's a common header across all the files. And they were random files, right? Long story short was what I didn't know about the tool is when it found a file that had something in the regular expression or Social Security, it encrypted the file.
Oh.
Which was great. I'm like, oh, cool. You take the file off the machine, nobody can use it. That's what it's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize when it uninstalled the agent, it didn't decrypt the files.
Oh.
So it did what it was kind of supposed to do, which was encrypt them. And as long as the agent was running, you could use the files all day. The second the agent wasn't running, the files were worthless. Wow. Now, on uninstall, there probably should have been better documentation that said, hey, make sure you run the decryption before you uninstall. So essentially, I hate to say I ransomwared myself, but the tool that we were using to protect the data did kind of what it should have done, with the exception of should have told me to do this before uninstalling. So it wasn't really a ransomware per se, but it was like we spent, the better part of a week with our good friends at Perch and Huntress and digging in and figuring this out on, we did it to ourselves, sort of.
I have an interesting story that I'll share. It was a company that reached out to us for some incident response work, and they were using a remote support solution, and they said, we keep getting these connections and then they just go away like really fast. But it keeps happening. And like, are we compromised? What's going on? Finally, what the outcome was it was Microsoft's security sandbox feature detonating the executable for the connection, setting a virtual machine up, trying to figure out, is this thing malicious? It would connect. And then it was like, okay, here are the results. And then it would the virtual machine would go away. And so that's kind of interesting about how these security tools and other tools, like you're saying, can almost work against you in some cases because maybe they're not reporting or maybe it's not documented, as you said. So yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, there's been some other war stories too. I think as MSPs, we've all had them.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really an enjoyable conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you?
So you can always find us at compliancescorecard.com. I personally am just relaunching timgolden.com. It's there. It's got some stuff there, but I'm relaunching timgolden.com. And so you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the books, all the instas, all the tweeters, all the things. Book a demo, compliancescorecard.com. Reach out to me, timgolden.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Tim. Really appreciate it.
Jacob, thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. Congratulations, by the way, on your new position. I'm really excited to see what you have in store. So congrats.
Thank you so much.
Hey, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. If you want to see more, be sure to subscribe and then check out this video.